So we're going to start now with this webinar on an introduction to mentoring with myself, Alexis Hutson. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to be talking to you for about 45 minutes this afternoon, talking to you about mentoring and what it might mean for you, and giving you the opportunity to really think through how this opportunity for learning, both as a mentor and mentee, might well work well for you. So, kicking off, just a little bit about me. There we go. So this is the first slide. So just so you know who I am and why I've got some ideas and some thoughts about mentoring and why I think it works for people. I have my own independent practice, and as it happens, I work exclusively with doctors, that's medical doctors, as a coach and a mentor. And I split my time evenly between working with both individuals and groups and teams. I've supported lots of organisations with their mentoring schemes, so I've been training mentors and mentees for a long time, including people like the Academy of Medical Sciences, Nottingham University Medical School, Royal College of Radiologists, and I also worked in the NHS myself for 9 years, primarily involved in medical education. So during that time, I've formed quite a lot of opinions and gained quite a lot of experience about why coaching and mentoring works for people, and specifically why mentoring schemes can be such powerful interventions for people in terms of their learning and their careers and getting ahead, really. So I'd like to share some of the insights that I've developed over the years and some of the experiences, and hopefully this will give you food for thought and some thinking around how you might benefit from this opportunity moving forward. So the purpose of the webinar, as I say, it's to introduce you to the whole idea of developmental mentoring, and that's a much more modern form of mentoring, and I'll go into that into some detail as we move forward. I also want to describe what it involves, what good looks like, what's good practice, and what I think helps to really make it an effective learning opportunity for people. Lots of organisations have mentoring schemes, and you may well already be involved in one in another organisation that you're employed by, or you might have had some training, or you might even have had a mentor in your more formative years. But it's important to really think about your opportunity in the here and now for what mentoring might mean for you and how that fits into your own career journey, whether you're already quite senior or you're still at the beginning of your career, and to think about how you want to move forward with your opportunities using mentoring for you. Now, just to give you a little bit of insight into the evidence supporting coaching and mentoring, there's not a huge lot of research out there that gives us any real sense of why coaching and mentoring works. It's quite a subjective field, it's quite a subjective activity, it's very, I suppose, personality-led in many ways, and so there's not much hard evidence that really supports why it works for people. But I will just point out this top bullet point here that was done by Ashridge Business School in 2012, and that the greatest predictor of the effectiveness of both coaching and mentoring is the quality of the relationship between the two people. So it's really worth you thinking about that as you move forward. I know that I've got both mentors and mentees joining us this afternoon, and it's really important that you take that on board in terms of thinking about the kind of relationship that you have with your mentor or mentee, and investing in that and making sure that it's up to scratch, really, because it's that that's going to make the opportunity work for you both. So what is mentoring? We may have had it maybe in a sports club when we were younger, or we may already be getting it as part of a university that we're currently employed in. But at its very basic level, it's a process of development for one individual, which is very supportive and positive. And it's typically provided by a more senior colleague who's based in the same profession and is longer term. But those two things are quite different to some degree from our more traditional learning environments, whether that be teaching or training. The difference between mentoring and those kinds of more usual traditional learning situations is that the idea is that we're drawing learning out of the person rather than pushing in information. And that should be the emphasis and the intention about a good quality, really effective mentoring relationship, is that the intention for the mentor is to draw out learning from the mentee rather than just handing over information and handing over the richness of your own experience. Sometimes those things can be useful, but the proportion of time spent for developmental mentoring should be on drawing out learning for the mentee or the learner. So that's what is characterizing mentoring, and that's why I think it's quite different and powerful as a learning opportunity for people, and that's why I think it's different to training and education. And if any of you have got any kind of observations or questions as we move through these slides, then please do do a little bit of chat question for us on the right-hand panel. You're very welcome to do that, and I'm quite keen for you to be as interactive as you want to be throughout this process. So that's what I mean by mentoring in its purest form. But what do I mean by developmental mentoring? Well, this is really characterized by the mentee being encouraged to do things for herself or himself. It's very much the autonomy and self-development of the person who's doing the learning, that's the mentee, and not simply providing opportunities for development or learning or experience or knowledge. So there is a recognition of value for both parties in this relationship. There is that mutuality of learning, but the mentee is in the driving seat. Very much so. It's their learning journey. It's about what they need to get out of it, their goals, and the mentor is there to support the mentee in order to hopefully reach their goals. Ideally, there shouldn't be any line of accountability. That can be tricky if you're being in a mentoring relationship in your workplace. But usually in a pure mentoring relationship, there shouldn't be that kind of hierarchical relationship involved in the setup. It's very much about experience and the supportive nature of the relationship rather than the hierarchy or line management. So that's what we mean by developmental mentoring. And that's quite different to what used to be a kind of structured mentoring scheme. That's what some people have had quite a lot of experience with already. And that's quite old-fashioned in some ways and is much more geared towards a kind of protege model where people are being sort of taken through an organization and being given a kind of buddy and being told what to do and how to get on. But this is quite different, and you have the beauty of having this with the Physiological Society is that you're part of a network which is of similar specialisms and ideas and experiences, but is not part of a hierarchy in any kind of way, in the sense that it would be if you were part of your own organisation that employs you. So that's what characterises developmental mentoring as opposed to a more traditional structured structured mentoring scheme. So I've got a little bit of a quote here from a guy called Mike Pegg, who has written quite a few books about mentoring over the years. And his quote is, "Great mentors provide a stimulating sanctuary in which people can take a helicopter view of their options." So does anybody want to just put into the little chat area there words that you think that really stand out for you? Any of those words that, excuse me, that really strike you as important at this point? I'll just give you a couple of minutes just to have a think about that. Which words in that quote do you think are really important? So what I often get when I use this quote in training is that people often pick out the words stimulating. Stimulating is an important word that people choose. And because I think the reason they pick that out is because stimulating is a word that reflects the kind of exciting enthusiasm, thought-provoking nature of how mentoring can work for people. It can be challenging, but stimulating means that it can also be exciting and mean new thinking for people. People often pick the word sanctuary because that implies that it's a safe space for people to do thinking, that it's a safe haven, if you like, and that it is protected in some way. And we often have really important conversations at that point about confidentiality and the private nature of the information that is being shared between the people in the mentoring relationship. People often pick out the word helicopter because that implies that you're going to gain some kind of perspective on things. You'll have that long view. You'll be able to step back and really think through what's going on from a distance that can be really helpful to people. When you're in the heat of the moment and you can't see the wood for the trees, it can be really difficult to do that. And also people pick out options because there are always options, and a great mentor can help you see the options and explore the options. And of course they are your options, not other people's options, that are a really important part of the mentoring process. So I think that quote really sort of encapsulates what some of the themes that are really important in the mentoring relationship, that it's stimulating, that it has this sanctuary element, that it gives perspective, a helicopter view, and it is about people's own options, their own thinking about how they want to move through to the next steps in their career. But what about the benefits for people in the mentoring relationship? Well, it might seem obvious that, well, yeah, the mentee, of course, they're going to have this safe haven for thinking things through. This is not their line manager or their research supervisor. This is somebody who is independent and separate, doesn't have the same sort of judgments or biases even potentially that other people in around you may have. And so hopefully you've got this opportunity to really think through things for yourselves safely and in a stimulating environment. But the mentor, you know, they get an awful lot out of this too, because people often say when they've first become mentors that developing another person is a really important part of their practice. It can help with leadership and management development, and reflecting on your own learning by listening to another human being is a really important part of people's development. And so mentors often talk about that they get so much out of it themselves just through listening and supporting another person. And clearly organisations know that this is of great benefit to them too, because it really does improve their retention and attraction of people in terms of recruitment. So everybody's a winner when it comes to mentoring, and we shouldn't forget that. So this is a great picture, and you may well have seen it doing the rounds in social media in terms of LinkedIn or Twitter or anything like that. But I think it makes the point that I haven't ever met anybody who's had the top career plan or pathway. Nobody has that sort of straightforward approach to their career without any obstacles or any difficulties that have happen for them. The reality is that the bottom picture is where most people are experiencing their career on a day-to-day basis, but also on a longer-term basis as well. So that is the reality for most of us. And certainly the scheme here at the Society has been set up with this in mind, that we all face challenges and obstacles in our careers. And so having somebody that you can talk through your options, your ideas, your challenges, navigating and negotiating your way through your career in a more purposeful way is a really good way of moving forward and not getting stuck. And that's certainly true when you have the kind of career where it's not necessarily obvious where your next step is, and it might be associated with a grant or getting a new research position, and it's not an easy or straightforward as just applying for a new job, for example. So mentoring really benefits those people who've got lots of options in front of them and lots of potential routes that they can take, and need that space to really think things through with an independent person. So here's a question for you. How could mentoring benefit you? And I really don't mind whether you're a mentor or a mentee, but it would be really good for you to think through, not just as a superficial level, oh well, mentoring would benefit me because it will help me write grant applications, but really, how would it benefit you in lots of other ways as well? You know, what are the kind of things that you would get out of this experience that are less obvious, perhaps? And it's really worth you reflecting on that as you move forward in terms of thinking about the options for your goals, thinking about what you want to develop in terms of your listening skills if you're a mentor, all these kinds of things. There's lots of different things that you might get out of this experience, and it might not just be the obvious or the superficial on the surface that you could benefit from. And so what we're going to do after the webinar comes to a close is we're going to do a little survey. I appreciate it says the word poll at the top there, but we're going to run this as a little survey because these following subjects are typically cited as areas that mentees would like support with. So I'm not asking you to vote against this category, each category now, but we will do a little bit of a survey afterwards, because over all the years that I've been doing coaching and mentoring, I see these categories coming up time and time and again, that people want support during challenging periods. And that challenging period could be because of a particular relationship at work, it could be because of not getting the job that you thought you were going to get, or it might be simply because your children are very young at the moment and it's very difficult to juggle all of the responsibilities that you have. A lot of people often cite, you know, gaining insight and self-awareness, because the opportunity to really think through and reflect on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you do things is few and far between. And having a mentoring relationship, having that space to think things through is a rare and precious thing. People often talk about wanting to build resilience and managing stress. Obviously, you know, we all are subject to those challenges in our daily life, and certainly having the space to talk through your ideas and what's challenging you at the moment has a therapeutic element to it. This isn't, of course, counselling or therapy, but the mere act of talking things through makes people feel better and gives them the opportunity to hear their own thinking, which is beneficial. People often say, well, I want to develop new skills, and it could be that, you know, report writing, or it could be the grant application. And of course, this will benefit you in those more obvious or transactional skill development areas. People talk about they want to be leaders with greater impact. And of course, thinking through your own style, your own behaviours is a really important part of developing your career and your leadership qualities and attributes. Handling transitions, of course, we're always going through transitions, and thinking about your route map through those transitions from all angles is really important. Of course, improving work-life balance. It often comes up a little bit way down the line. So people talk about work-life balance, but often perhaps after 2 or 3 mentoring sessions. So don't be surprised if that starts to come onto the agenda after you've started talking about the things that are more at the forefront of your mind. People often talk about, obviously, their career moves, and then that goes back to the transition. But actually, of course, rebooting and motivation and reminding yourself what really energizes you is a great way of thinking about how you want to move forward as well. So have a look at that survey when it comes at the end of the webinar, and tell us what you think, because that's all really useful data for us in thinking about how we develop this scheme for you, because it's very much about you. We very much want this to be light touch. But we do need to know what you want to get out of it and what you think is going to be the things that you're really going to be working on. So please do share that with us, and of course we'll treat the information anonymously. So let's get back onto how does mentoring work from a practical point of view. So we've got 3 areas in this giant arrow: exploration, new understanding, and action planning. And I used to have these 3 blue boxes all the same size, saying that, yeah, you know, we start with exploration, that moves into new understanding, and that moves into action planning, because you want people to be working towards their goals and thinking about what actions they're going to take forward in order to help them achieve those goals. And that's all still true. The direction of travel should all still be in that direction. But more recently, I've increased the size of that exploration box, because I think that is the most important part of the conversation, this one-to-one conversation that you're having with people. The exploration and the drawing out of ideas and the thinking is the crucial part of any mentoring conversation. And you can only do that if you've got trust and you've got the safety that your information is going to be treated confidentially. So that exploration piece is incredibly important. And that's what feels quite different to our more normal conversations that we have with our professional peers or colleagues or whoever. Often our more normal conversations are transactional by nature. We're telling people about what we've done, we're talking about tasks, we're talking about things that need to be done. But this conversation needs to be much more transformational in its nature. So it's the difference between making this conversation transactional and making it much more transformational. Because it takes me back to that piece that I was talking about earlier, that it is about drawing out learning and helping the mentee figure things out for themselves, rather than just providing the answers or just providing knowledge and experience. Sometimes that can be useful, but it's much more powerful to help people do the very best thinking for themselves. And if that's working really well, then the new understanding flows naturally out of that exploratory process. People come to new conclusions about what their options are and what's realistic and what's not realistic, and then the action planning naturally falls out of that and is quite straightforward, hopefully. So that's in general terms how I think mentoring works in its purest form. And I think having your mind's eye, whether you be a mentor or a mentee, on those 3 areas, and understanding that that's the direction of travel that you should be working to, and the proportions as well, I think is really important for people. So what does it actually involve? Well, obviously it's a one-to-one conversation between 2 people. That's obvious, isn't it? But it is characterized by this whole piece about confidentiality. The mentee really is unable to share things properly if they think that the information is going to be spread or is going to be shared wider than one-to-one. So you've really got to work hard on building trust in order to make sure that platform that you're both sitting on, in terms of the understanding in the relationship around the confidential nature of the information, is really important. But equally, appreciation and attention on the person and on the subject are incredibly important too. So appreciating what people are going through, and paying attention to them, not only just the content, but also the whole person, and having that empathetic approach to what they're going through. You may have been through it yourself as a mentor, or you might not have encountered this at all as a mentor, but you can sympathize and you can appreciate it, and so that supportive element comes out of excuse me, those things, you know, the appreciation, the attention and the empathy. That is a platform of supportive development for the other person. And then this other piece up here, ease, space, time to think. Well, hey, we all live in a very pressurized, busy world, and it's, you know, our conversations are short and snappy and to the point and purposeful, and you know, we get to the heart of things hopefully as quickly as possible, and of course that has its purpose in our busy worlds that we live in. But actually, this kind of conversation, if you've got an hour, a whole hour to really think things through and to really listen to another human being as a mentor, then that ease and that relaxed nature is really important, so that people can slow down their thinking and stop being so sort of pressurized in coming to conclusions too quickly. I think that is a really important element to what mentoring involves too. And all of those things are put together help build trust. There needs to be trust between the two of you in this relationship. And because, of course, the mentor might be sharing things about their own career journey that they don't particularly want shared with anybody else too. So it goes both ways, that confidentiality and that trust piece. Absolutely. And all of that is done through really good quality listening. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about listening, because I think it's really important for us to think about this within the context of this conversation. Listening is not assuming you know what the other person is going to say next. We do an awful lot of that. We spend a lot of time waiting for our turn to speak. And if we get bored because we think we know what the other person is going to say next, and we just interrupt, or we're waiting for that gap, or we're racing ahead in our mind, thinking, well, I know where she's going to go with this, or we should just get to the point because I know what I'm going to say in response to it. And we think that we're there then to just fix it, or to give our advice, or to impart our superior knowledge. And that's what often happens in our normal listening activities. When we're talking with each other in our normal conversations. But actually it needs to be different in a mentoring conversation. It needs to be different because we need to be really listening very well to the whole person, so that they have the freedom to really think through their own thoughts. And that can be really hard work, because it's not what we do often normally for a lot of us. But also we're used to the pace of life and the pressurized style of our life, that we are working at a faster pace, if you like. And equally for the mentee, we might just not be used to being listened to. It might feel odd. So somebody might ask us a question, and we race out our answer as quickly as possible because we want to get it out there before we're interrupted. So we're conditioned from both sides of the table, if you like, to not really listen well or be listened to well. And I think, you know, as part of some training, if we get the opportunity to do some face-to-face training, we really get to explore this and have some fun with it, to give you the opportunity to really explore it a little bit further. So I think that's a crucial sort of slide for us here, really, is to know that a mentoring conversation is characterized by really good listening skills and being listened to really well, and understanding that that might well feel different to your normal conversations. So what can hinder great mentoring? Well, there's these three things really. We're used to listening for clues to help diagnosis, and I don't mean medical diagnosis, I just mean problem solving. You know, how can I fix this? What's my input going to be? What am I going to say in response? And so therefore we're listening to the content and we're listening for those clues that give us, okay, that's what I'm going to say. And also, of course, as I've said already, we're used to being in these pressurized conversations where time is limited, so we need to get to the point quickly. And a lot of us are used to directing more junior colleagues, so we're used to that hierarchical nature in our relationships, where we're used to just telling people how to do it, you know. And if we're more junior, we're used to being told how to do it. Just tell me what to do. Don't keep asking me questions. So that can hinder really great mentoring if we're really keen to draw out learning rather than simply just to push information in. So just be mindful of that from whether you be a mentor or a mentee, because both are really important characteristics in forming your relationship, is understanding both of your roles in terms of this listening piece, if you like. So how to get the most out of mentoring for you, whether you be a mentor or mentee. If I just cite back to the Ashridge research, as I say, it's all about the quality of the relationship. And in order to manage the quality of that relationship, for it to be successful for you to be, for you both, you need to manage your expectations. So you both need to know what you're going to be getting out of this and what your roles are in all of this, and how you're going to be building trust through building rapport, how you're going to have that authentic connection with each other. You both being committed to meeting up and having that designated time and doing what you say that you're going to do. It's, you know, it is a voluntary thing that you're both doing here, and I guess it's, you know, above and beyond what you're already doing for your busy lives. But having that commitment and making sure that you're signed up for working with this person, be they a mentor or a mentee, is really important in terms of managing your expectations. So what I say to people when I'm running face-to-face training is really what you should expect from the mentor is that empathy and that sort of sympathy and understanding about where you are and what your challenges are and what you want to do. But also you should expect some challenge back and some stretch back in your thinking. It's not safe, cozy little chat here and agreeing with everything you're saying. The mentor is there to help you stretch your thinking and to think in new ways and have the opportunity to challenge your own ideas a little bit. You should expect the sharing of experience. You know, they've been through not necessarily exactly the same thing, but similar things, so they may well want to share that experience. Obviously, I've laboured this point, but you should expect confidentiality. You should expect a degree of friendliness, and I don't mean friendship, I do mean friendliness, because having that kind of authentic connection, that bond with each other, is important. I've always found something to like in all the people that I've coached and mentored over all the years I've been working in this, and I think it's important to search for that and understand where there is a connection between you both. You should expect from the mentor help with understanding and help with building networks. I don't mean doing it for you. What I mean by that is perhaps signposting you to new areas or new networks or conferences or whatever. You should expect them to be a sounding board, and of course you should expect them to be listening to you really well. So there's this, and you know, if we get to do some face-to-face training, a whole load of other things that you can expect from your mentor. But that's what they're there to do, is to give you that environment to do the very best thinking for yourself and to really stretch your thinking. And that will often be done through really good open questioning to help you. So what should you expect from the mentees, mentors? Well, you should expect them to be respecting the time and the effort that you're putting into this. So, you know, being very clear about when you're going to meet, the start time, the finish time, and respecting that effort that you're putting into investing in this relationship. You should expect them to expect access to the mentor's experience. So, as I say, you should expect to share your experience, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they should do exactly what you've done in your past, and that's quite an important distinction to be mindful of. Mentees, you should be prepping for each session, so you should have made hopefully some progress from the last time, and you need to update your mentor on what you've done from last time, and so there should be some prep in advance of each session. You might want to email them a kind of list of agenda items that you want to talk through, or you might want to do it in a different way, but be ready and arrive ready. You should expect to make up your own mind, mentees. You're not there to make the mentor feel good by doing what they've done. You're there to make up your own mind about things. And you should be there to offer feedback if it's not working. You both should be doing that. You're both responsible for the quality of the relationship. And I've put this last bullet point in there: manage the relationship and initiate admin. This is very light touch, this scheme, so do not worry about heavy admin. What I mean by that is just making sure that you've got a space organised in terms of meeting and how you're going to make that work via Skype or FaceTime or face-to-face or whatever. So just make sure that those things are in place, really. So just summarise that down into these 2 points. The mentors, it's your responsibility to make sure what happens within the mentoring conversation is high quality, and the mentee, it's your responsibility what happens between the sessions, because of course that's when you do the vast majority of your learning and actions. And so the role of the mentor, you could be all of these things or just one of these things for your mentee, and it depends on them what you need to be. You could be a sounding board, it could be around being a role model, you could be a challenger, a career counsellor, or a development professional advisor, a critical friend, or a networker or a facilitator. It's up to you to figure out with your mentee which one of these things or whatever other roles occur to you that you need to do with that person. And some of these things will be more comfortable to you than others. And the role of the mentee, you need to be responsible for what happens between the sessions and make the time and respect the time for those sessions. But crucially, you need to be reflective and open with your thinking. If you can't be fully open with your thinking, then neither of you are getting the full picture. And so it's important that you're able to do that. Be committed to your learning and prepare and implement your actions. So really important that you're aware of the roles in this relationship and how it's going to work. And crucially, that brings us to this piece about building rapport. All of this works in terms of building trust. You know that you're focused on what you're working together. There's an empathetic quality to it. You have a connection, and it's all about empowering the mentee to get the very best out of themselves. So we're going to launch a little poll now, and this is for the mentors. So as a mentor, poll open, yes. So hopefully you can see on your screen now, you've got some questions here, and I'd like you to vote on these 4 questions. As a mentor, which of these might you struggle with? Is it number 1, remaining impartial and trying to fix and offering solutions? Is it creating the right atmosphere and the ease? Would that be a struggle for you? Would it be coming up with the great questions that really open up thinking with people? Or would it be simply just finding the time to meet up in a busy schedule that it's already rammed? So I'll just give you a couple more seconds to vote. We've got those votes coming in now. Okay, so I'm going to close that poll now. 3, 2, 1. Okay, So our results are up there, and it can, as I can see, 50% of you, in terms of the mentors rather, recognise that remaining impartial and trying to fix it and offering solutions is going to be a big struggle for you. And even those of us who have been coaching and mentoring for years still struggle with that aspect of it, because we want to help, we want to get involved in people's solutions, and it's really difficult to maintain that distance, retain that distance. But it is important, and I think just being mindful of it and aware of it can be really helpful. And then the other two, coming up with great questions and finding the time to meet, are also, you know, crucial things that people need help with. You know, we can post perhaps afterwards as a little handout to this some great questions which I think you'll find useful. So we can post that as a resource to the attendees afterwards. It gets easier with time, I have to say. And then finding the time to meet up, of course, that's difficult for us all. But if you really like your mentee and you want to work with them and you're really encouraged by the progress that they're meeting, then it kind of gets easier to kind of put that into your diary. So think about how you mitigate against these risks in terms of understanding that all of these are challenges for all coaches and mentors. Think about what that means for you and how you might mitigate those risks. Okay, so let's just talk just briefly about goal setting in terms of the mentees. Now, don't switch off mentors while I'm talking about this, because I also say to mentors when I'm training them, particularly in face-to-face, is that actually it's pretty important for you to have a kind of a goal in the background for you too. And it might be something around, you know, I really want to understand how I help people come to their own decisions better, or it might be I want to improve my listening skills. So you may well, as a mentor, have a goal as part of this mentoring relationship too. But it's crucial for the mentees to really think about their goal in all of this too. And that might be obvious to you now. It might be, yes, it's about grant applications, or it's about work-life balance, or whatever. But really making that a quite specific and smart goal, and working with your mentor to understand why that's important and what the challenges are and what your options are moving forward and who might help you, is a really important part of goal setting, and coming back to that goal and checking in on it and evolving it and understanding that it might need to be adapted along the way is really important for you to be to work on throughout the whole of your time in the mentoring relationship. And so thinking about your goal right at the beginning of the relationship is important, but continuing to work on it and accepting that it might need to adapt or evolve over time is also important. So I'm going to do another little poll now, and this is for the mentees. And I'm launching this poll now. So, as a mentee, which of these might you struggle with? So, thinking about your relationship, thinking about the actual process of sitting down and working with the mentor, what would you struggle with? Is it sharing your thinking honestly and openly? Is it coming up with an appropriate goal that's really specific and really identifiable and measurable and achievable? Is it making the time for the meeting up? We all struggle with that. Or is it doing what I said I was going to do between the sessions? So I can see that there's lots of voting taking place now, so I'll allow you to keep hitting those buttons and seeing what you think about that. So I'll start to draw that to a close now. 3, 2, 1. Okay, we've closed that now. So 83%, wow, that's a big result, is 83% of the mentees think that doing what you said you were going to do between the sessions is going to be your biggest challenge. It's your learning journey. So it's not just about that time just meeting up with your mentor and talking things through. That's important and that's useful. But actually making this a purposeful activity and going away and doing something about it is where the magic happens, to be honest, and where it's really important. So if you know that about yourself, if you know that that's going to be a challenge because you've already got a busy schedule and you're not sure how you're going to fit in the stuff, then say that up front with your mentor and figure that out right from the outset. What am I going to do between the sessions? Am I being too ambitious by setting this action between now and June? Is that realistic? How can I chunk this down into manageable bite-sized pieces that help me incrementally work towards this? And what am I going to do this week and next week in order to work on that? And you as the mentors can really help people with that, because you know we all struggle with that between meetings or whatever. So yeah, that's a big one, and I think is being open and honest with yourself about that, and being open and honest with your mentor about that is really important. But also we've got 50% of people saying actually coming up with an appropriate goal is going to be a struggle actually. And that's okay. Don't worry too much if you're going to be turning up to your first session and you're not really quite sure what you want to work on, and you've got some ideas about A, B, and C, but you're not really clear yet how this might work and whether you're going to feel comfortable talking to this person about that sort of thing, and whether you're going to feel a bit weird talking about work-life balance. And so that's okay to accept that things will evolve over time, and that part of the first half, if you like, of your relationship setting up is about helping you come up with that goal. So don't worry about that. So again, as I said to the mentors, think about whichever one you ticked, why you think that might be a struggle for you, and think about how you might mitigate against that risk. Know yourself and do something about it. Okay, so let's move on, because I want to tell you a little bit about the phases of the relationship so that you understand what you're getting into from the outset, really. Okay, so this is on a scale against time and the intensity of learning and value added throughout the entirety of the relationship. In the beginning, it's really about building rapport. It's about understanding how this is going to work between you both, what the conditions are of how you're going to meet, whether that be Skype or face-to-face, how often you're going to meet, what are you working on, what's your connection with each other, and really establishing the conditions of how you're going to work with each other and understand what it's all about, really. And that then naturally moves into this piece around setting direction. So what's the goal? What are you going to be working on? How might that look? What are your options? What do you need to explore first? What do you actually need to achieve in the next 6 months? And really help formulate the route map that you're going to be working on. Then we come into the greatest area of intensity of learning and value added, really, which is the progression through meeting up and, crucially, the activities between sessions in terms of getting things done and trying things out. And that, you know, you can fail, and that's okay. Things can mess up, and you can come back and report back on that and reflect and move forward. But that's the largest share, if you like, of the nature of the relationship, is that progression piece, when you're really learning, you're really motoring, and you're really moving forward with your ideas and your goals. And that gets to a point sort of just after halfway, when things start to wind up, where you're becoming, as a mentee, a bit more independent actually in your thinking, and you're starting to instigate things outside of sessions that are also helping you move forward with your goal now. So actually it starts to what we call wind up at that point. And then what you need to be doing in your last sort of session with each other is moving on. We're not fostering dependence here, we are fostering independence. So this is not something that needs to go on forever. And so you need to talk about in that whole kind of first piece is, well, how many times are we going to meet? Could that be 6 times over a year, for example? And are the first 4 sessions going to be needed in the first 6 months, and then we'll just schedule in 2 sessions for the last 6 months? How's it going to work? What works for you, and what is relevant for you given the deadlines that you might have, or the nature of the goal that you might be working on? So hopefully that gives you a feel for the natural phases of a mentoring relationship and how it might work. So I'm moving now through to the last couple of slides. So this is really top tips for mentors. And I always suggest this to people, is that as a mentor, try and stop fixing it. We do that so much in our daily lives, particularly in our professional lives. And actually in this relationship, you don't have to fix it. You're free not to have to fix it. Therefore, you don't have to do the work. You don't have to take things away at the end of the conversation, at least you shouldn't be. And it's not about your agenda. Okay, you might be sharing your experience, but it's not about you. It is about the mentee. And so I also suggest to people, don't focus on the issues alone, the content of what people are bringing to you. Think about the wider picture, the wider environment. That bigger picture and that perspective is really useful to your mentee. And also don't rush quite so much, you know, that whole thing about ease and allowing people to think things through in a peaceful way so that they can really interrogate and interpret their own ideas much more thoroughly and deeply. You can help that by not rushing. And then I've got some top tips for mentees. Sadly, you do the work. It is about you. It is your learning journey. So commit to that. Commit to this being an important part of your personal development agenda and plan. And this is a great opportunity for you to purposefully work on that and do something brilliant for yourself. Therefore, you're setting the agenda. You're going to your mentee and your mentor rather and saying, this is what I want to talk about, this is what I need help with, these are my ideas, and value that time to think. Value your own thinking, your own ideas, and the direction of your own thoughts, even if that might feel meandering and it might feel like you're just downloading, or actually you might feel like sometimes you've got a bit of verbal diarrhea. That's okay too. And do access your mentor's knowledge and experience. You don't have to do what they did, but do access it, because it might give you greater insight into what are good options for you to take forward. Almost last slide for you then. So this is a quote by a woman called Nancy Klein, who has written a book called Time to Think and More Time to Think, which have had a huge impact on my own thinking about coaching and mentoring. But she says the quality of your attention determines the quality of other people's thinking. And I say that particularly to the mentors. That attention that you're giving to that other human being actively and purposefully helps the quality of their thinking. So that attention is actively giving them the opportunity to do the very best thinking for themselves. And that's really exciting to be a part of. It's a really energizing activity in my experience, and you know, really enjoy the journey that you're going to be sharing with this other person. So I've got my last slide now, which is open the floor out for questions, if you've got any for me. Just to say that obviously the scheme here is very much evolving. We really do want to hear from you about what kinds of things you do need help with, what you don't need help with. You know, if you've already registered for the scheme, that we've got the website pages where you can register as a mentor or a mentee, and we ask you some fairly basic questions about, you know, what you'd like to achieve and what kind of geography you're located in, and therefore how we might need to match you up with a suitable mentor or mentee. So that helps us get you hooked up with the right person. Also, to remind you that if things aren't working out for whatever reason, please don't suffer in silence. Please do come back to us and say, hang on a minute, it's not working out because this person is just either too busy or too far away, or we just didn't click and I'm just not sure this is the right person for me. Please do come back to us and we will help you sort out that situation for you. So, again, any questions for us now, then we'd be happy to answer those in the little chat area. I've really enjoyed sharing these slides with you. It really is just to kind of give you the opportunity to think through what's important to you as you embark on this mentoring relationship with either your mentor or mentee. We hopefully will get some more resources out to you. As I said, I'd like to get some really good questions, examples of really good questions out to mentors, if that's a useful resource. You've got the slides here in the GoToWebinar facility, so you can have a look at those as well. Please do come back to us at a later date with any other questions. But I think we're about wrapping up now, unless we've... No, we've got no questions. No, that's fine. I'm going to take that as a positive indicator that I've answered all of your questions brilliantly as I've gone along. But yeah, please do keep talking to us. We'd really love to hear from you, and hopefully this has given you food for thought and lots of ideas to take forward as you move forward in your mentoring relationships. Thanks very much for your time.